Hello, welcome everyone to another episode of the Virtual Ninja Show. My name is Heike, and today I have Rod with me, and it's long overdue. Rod, introduce yourself, who you are, in case somebody doesn't know you yet.
No, I am Rod Trent. I'm a senior program manager at Microsoft in the advocacy group. At Microsoft, I have been focused on cybersecurity and, of all things, AI for the last year and a half. Imagine that, a Microsoft person focused on AI. It just seems kind of ridiculous, right? That you would be able to find someone. It's just rare. No, just kidding. In my role at Microsoft, I have an awesome responsibility. It's almost like a diamond in the rough type of role, right? So, if you will, bear with me for a second. As part of the advocacy group, I am an advocate to both the product team and our customers. So, what I do at Microsoft is I advocate for our products to our customers. And then I turn around and advocate for our customers to our product teams. So, all of that feedback, all of the knowledge gaps potentially that customers have, I'm able to kind of put that together and consolidate and ensure that we fill those gaps and that our product teams are taking that feedback and putting it directly on the roadmap, which actually is related to, I believe, our topic in discussion today.
Yes. And I mean, that's why, because you do a lot in public, people probably know you. If not, we will add links later where they can find you, because you do shows and you have blogs and a lot of awesome content. And today, the awesome content we are going to talk about is a workshop that you created for Copilot for Security, and it's about prompting. We did other episodes on prompting because I feel it's the most important thing, knowledge someone needs to have in order to communicate properly with Copilot for Security and get the best results back. So why did you create that workshop, and how did you get to it?
Well, kind of back to related what I mentioned earlier during the introduction. This is one of those areas that I have identified. You mentioned I do a lot of things publicly. I'm extremely easy to find. If anybody wants to follow me or follow the content I create, just search for Rod Trent. Easy to find. But in relation to that, I'm in person with customers quite often, right? So at conferences, I speak, user groups. We do a security show once a week called the Microsoft Security Insight Show. But through that, I'm able to connect directly with customers. And one of the knowledge gaps, the skills gaps that we've identified is prompting. You might think that this is like the silliest thing in the world. Hey, I've been prompting forever. I use Google or I use Bing and I type in my search queries and I get the results. But it's not quite as simple as that, because we have kind of gotten into this bad habit over time because of search engines and the way that they work. We type in as few words and characters as possible to get the results. And then we understand that we have to do the vetting after the fact to determine whether or not those results are actually what we were looking for. Today, of copilots and ChatGPT and stuff like this, we have to go back and change our mindset a little bit, in that we're having almost like an in-person conversation. We don't have to type in 4 words and then just expect to do the due diligence and the work after the fact. If we treat this as an in-person conversation and we ask the right question, we're going to get the right answer. We're going to get the right response. And in the day of copilots, when, yes, there is a charge for using a copilot, the more efficient you can be with your prompt, the more efficient it's going to be with the responses. So you don't have to go over and over and over and over and keep asking questions till you figure out what it is that you wanted.
I had an episode with Showbit on this topic, and I keep saying, as you as well, like, if I treat that as a person and explain my needs in that way, I also become much better in like typing it down. If it was a real person, I wouldn't just say report incident 268. Like, I would say what I need, what's the outcome, what is it, a summary or just like a one liner, like so this is not the only workshop, but like, what is the concept for your workshops? Explain a little bit.
So this workshop, I think, is a little bit interesting in that, right, it comes directly from customer feedback. So I've been working with customers, also working with our partner group. which this workshop already, even though it's still kind of a work in progress, I think it's like almost 90 slides at this point, but it takes kind of a different approach in that it starts all the way at the beginning. Because I think to understand how to prompt effectively, you actually kind of need to have a good base understanding of generative AI in general. So this workshop starts at the generative AI piece, and then it talks about things like what tokens cost. Because when you think about what these prompts are, every one of those prompts, there's a token assigned to every one of those characters.
Mhm.
And there is a cost. So if you understand how tokens work, then you also understand the limitations that you might potentially have with those prompts. And then it goes through prompt engineering, which is like everyone's favorite new job role these days, which really, truly, when you think about it, we are all prompt engineers and we should be able to get to the point where we are very good at prompting. It's not going to improve prompting for everyone, again, because we have to kind of shake ourselves from that search engine mentality. But people like, unfortunately, my mom, who can't even get Google, she will probably never be a good prompter. So, unfortunately, this is not going to help everyone, but we want to help the largest number of people possible with this. And then this workshop delves deeply into, and I know you've had a bunch of sessions recently on Copilot for security. This is where I've had my focus for the past year. So I'm taking all of that and then applying it to Copilot for security very specifically. It's not that Copilot for security is that different than our other Copilots. It's just it's hyper focused on security. And if you can adjust your prompts as a security person, then you're going to get those responses back that are important for your daily job. So the interesting thing about this workshop, additionally, it is focused on Copilot for security. It is focused on the security piece, right? However, you could literally strip Copilot for security from this deck and deliver it as something, a prompting workshop just for any of our Copilots, because it's not that much different. Again, we're focused here on the security aspect, but obviously you want to be able to utilize this across the board for others. I actually have a couple MVPs that are delivering this in its current form now, and also our Copilot for Security Partners group. So it's pretty interesting.
That actually uh, brings me to my other question that I had. So when you say workshop, is that something that someone needs to get delivered, or can I just say, "Hey, I want to invest the time and I get that workshop and I work through it myself," or what's the best experience?
Well, and to be honest, well, I'll say most everything that I do at Microsoft, I create it to be utilized by anyone, right? Obviously, in my role, there's things that we do internally that's just for Microsoft or just internal to Microsoft groups. But most of the stuff, because I am working between the product group and our customers, I'm very open about the things that I create, and I create these things for everyone. So this workshop actually right now resides on one of my GitHub repositories. Incidentally, for Copilot for security, there's a whole prompting area. So there's prompt examples and things that you could use for Copilot for security that's continually updated. In that prompting directory, this workshop exists. Every time that I update it here, I also update it on the GitHub repository so anyone can have the latest and greatest stuff. I have a few things that I would love to be able to complete about this thing so I feel a little bit more comfortable. Particularly the notes. I'm going to create a script of how to deliver this thing, right? So anyone could download this, run through it, run through the script notes, and then they can deliver it themselves. They can deliver it to their own teams within their organizations. Maybe it's an MVP or one of our partners that can deliver it to their customers. My goal here is just to make this content free for anyone because I believe, as you mentioned earlier, prompting is the gateway drug to all of these copilots,
Yes.
right? That's going to enable you to use these more effectively. Now, want to highlight you mentioned workshop. Workshop is sometimes used to identify something that has hands-on activities and all that good stuff. This workshop is a little bit different for now, understandably, and I get asked this quite a bit. Hey, how can we get a trial of Copilot for security, or how can we get access to Copilot for security? Even the MVPs don't have access to that right now. We're working on that. The eventual hope for this workshop is that there will be a demo environment that people can actually perform hands-on. Right now, after each section is delivered, there's a series of questions, right? The audience
Mhm.
can answer the questions and see what the responses are to determine if, obviously, you delivered that session appropriately and they actually got out of it what you intended them to get out of it. But I will promise you, at the end of this workshop, you will be a better prompter. Maybe not a prompt engineer, because that will not exist in the future, but because we're all prompt engineers, but you'll be a good prompter.
I'm curious to see it now. Let's start. So let's have a look at, I think it starts with a presentation and then we go a little bit through it. So for the audience to see what it looks like.
All right, so this is the deck for the Developing Better Prompts for Copilot for Security workshop. Obviously, there's the intro section, but I did want to highlight at least a few things to give people kind of some insight in exactly what I was talking about, what this workshop covers. As I had noted before, obviously there's a whole section on generative AI. Most people believe, I think, they know what generative AI is these days, but we'll go through that aspect because it really actually is important to understand what the capability of generative AI is when you do this prompting, right? So understanding what's going on in the back end, what the services provide, what the intent is, and what you can expect as far as a response. Then we delve into the generative AI tokens, which we kind of alluded to just a little bit before, which I think is so super interesting and should be interesting to a lot of folks, because a lot of times we use things like ChatGPT and we just assume that it does what it does. We expect those responses to come back, but we never think about tokens or what the cost of those tokens are until we start utilizing something like Copilot for Security, where it becomes more of kind of a cost issue.
So what is it? What is a token?
A token is a measure of that question or that query. So one token equal 4 characters in English. So as you start splitting up
Yeah.
your questions and your paragraphs, the things that you're asking these GPT instances, that is split up into tokens. And that's an open AI thing where they take that and that's how they apply cost to those.
But if that's my currency and I'm trying to explain to people like, no, write it out, be as descriptive as possible. I'm just telling them spend more money.
Think of it this way. You can utilize these tools and type in 10, 12, 20 queries to get the response that you want because you're still trying to figure it out. But in the end, if you do utilize all the tokens, if you do utilize and create the type of question that's going to produce the proper response, you only have to do that once. So it's cheaper and more efficient to do it from a better prompting perspective.
Wow. But it looks, I don't know, horrible. Like, one paragraph is like 100 tokens and I'm seeing dollar signs for myself. So can we translate? I don't know, because we have SCUs with Copilot for Security. Can we translate tokens? Like how many tokens are there in something like that?
I will tell you, there is probably a calculation for that somewhere, but we don't make that clearly evident. We invented the SCU, the Security Compute Unit, to help customers
Mhm.
have an easier idea of how these things are billed and charged, right? For the compute.
So in Copilot or like in the Microsoft world, we are not talking in tokens. We are talking in, okay.
We don't. We don't. But that does apply on the back end. And when you think about your prompting and the efficiency of prompting, if you think about it in a tokenized manner, then you're going to be more distinct and also more clear in how you respond or how you ask questions. Again, remember, we're trying to go back to this in person discussion. If I'm a good
Mhm.
communicator, if I'm very clear when I talk to you and I ask you questions, then your responses are going to be much clearer as well. Or it's again going back to that in-person conversation.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. The next part of this, we talked about that prompt engineering. We'll talk about what that is, go deep into what that looks like is potentially a career.
Mhm.
I think this career is probably short-lived, but there is a lot of opportunity here for people that can actually communicate and write effectively. You can be a prompt engineer, right? And so as a prompt engineer, you are helping develop these GPT instances, helping train them so that they respond
Mhm.
better. We do that even at Microsoft
Mhm.
in some respects, but again, we are all prompt engineers, or at least should be able to get to the point where that is part of our capability and skill set.
Wow, interesting.
Then, obviously, as I mentioned, this is directed toward Copilot for Security. So there's a whole section on Copilot for Security, what that is. There's also a slide eventually about the SCU that you talked about. We go into the SCU, what that actually is, what that means. go back to those tokens, talk about that a little bit, and then
Mhm.
talk about how prompting is super important or efficient, and better prompting is better for Copilot for security. There's a whole section on prompting, which I think is super important. Just literally, again, trying to get a better understanding of how the prompting works, particularly when in Copilot for security. So there's a whole process. So you understand that not only do you want to create a good prompt, you want to create an efficient prompt so that the responses come back even quicker as well. So it goes through this whole process. Understanding
Mm.
how Copilot for security processes those prompts is super important, and also developing those prompt use cases.
Yeah, in this context here on the slide, for me, it was also, wow, okay, a moment. Because when you submit your prompt, there is that orchestrator that's finding the right source to ask
Yeah.
that question. And I thought you can, like, just type in everything and then it goes around. But for now, it goes to one source. So make sure.
Right. That's a very good thing to highlight and point out. When you query Copilot for security, yes, it looks for that one source or that one plugin that's going to provide that response. But I will tell you, I've done this before. That's something I'm going to add to this workshop. The power of the use command or the use statement within Copilot for security is huge. I can say use, if I know what
Mm.
the plugin is, use this plugin to give me this response. And then in a session and in a series of responses, I can say, use this plugin now. And then I can go use this plugin for
Yeah.
this extra tidbit of information so that I'm filling out the entire response that I want.
Yeah, especially you stay in context and you keep the information that you just received from a previous plugin. So it's not that then in the end you need to stitch together all the different answers that you got. Um, but it's so important to understand, be specific, um, and if you know the plugin, like add it to your prompt.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a very good way to ensure that you're going to get the response that you want. One of the things that we do as part of this process that's not on this slide is go through the mechanism, go through the back end of determining whether or not that response is actually going to be a responsible response. So that's not actually on this slide, but that is also
Mm.
part of the process. When you consider developing good prompts, you want to be kind with your questions. You want to ensure that the responses that come back don't go into some mechanism somewhere that says, well, that response is going to be harmful, so that we're not going to supply that response for you,
Mhm.
or it's irrelevant.
Mm.
Because again, we're
Mm.
talking about Copilot for security. If I ask Copilot for security what camping gear that I should buy for this weekend when it's going to be all rain, it's just going to come back and say, you know what? We went through the responsible AI piece. We determined that this is not a security component, and we're not going to respond.
It's kind of a little bit security, right? You don't want to get wet,
Well,
but
yeah, that's all relative, I guess. Subjective, somewhat.
okay, back to the workshop.
Yeah,
Um,
back to the workshop. So processing the prompts and then jumping into actual effective prompting for Copilot for security. One of my favorite slides, one of my favorite ideas around this. So growing up in grade school here in the United States, we did sentence diagramming, right? So you choose the subject. It's supposed to help you develop better writing and communication skills. Splitting off the subject from the verb and the adverb and the topic and all that stuff, the nouns, predicates, everything.
mhm.
So we do something very similar with prompting, right? So you want to identify what your goal is for the prompt and what your expectation is. Those two things are absolutely critical: goal, expectation. But developing a better prompt, you want to add some other stuff to it. And you can see here, as far as this prompting diagram structure, got our goal and expectation. Then you can tell it where you want it to look for that information and then add some additional context as well.
Mhm.
All right, so part of this diagram, let's look at this prompt. Look in Defender and tell me about the entities associated with incident 18718 for a summarized report I can submit to my manager. So let's diagram this. Let's architect and see what this looks like based on what we've talked about: the goal, expectation, the source, and the context. All right. So my goal is, hey, I want to know about the entities in incident 18718.
I have a question there. When you say my goal is, I want to know about the entities. Couldn't it be also my goal is to have a summary for my manager?
Well, if you started this prompt with, I want a summary from my manager, you've not really provided that in person conversation. It's like My daughter's exactly the same. In her head, she's had this conversation going on for like the last 2 minutes. She will start in the middle of the conversation with an in-person person thinking that we know where she's at in this conversation. And I'm like, what? What just happened?
No, you could just like, let's say the expectation is details of the entities should be in the report. I'm just saying, like,
Yeah.
sometimes people might understand it differently, but in the end, it doesn't really matter if it's the goal or the expectations, as long as both of them have the description properly prompted
Yes.
that you want,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. No, that's good. You can see here looking for those entities. And then what do we want to do? We want to look in Defender. I want you to go look in Defender for this stuff, not Sentinel, not one of our other Microsoft products. My expectation is I get a summarization of these entities. I don't want all these entities listed out. I don't want to know where they are, when they've logged in. All I want is a summarization of these entities, but I also want it in a format that I can send to my manager. And I can actually get even more explicit there. Send to my SOC manager or send to my CISO
Yeah.
or the type of report that I want, because we know that every manager looks at things differently. Some love spreadsheets, some love pretty pictures, like a Power BI. So we can even adjust it to that level if we need to be able to do that.
Mm.
Also, part of
Yeah.
this slide, you'll see there's QR codes all across this workshop. That's something that I found that's been very helpful and enabling customers and people I talk to become more engaged. They'll take a picture of that. This is that actual prompt library I was talking about a little bit earlier. So
Oh, okay, cool. I was just about to ask.
I put QR codes throughout. It's really easy for people to go check new things out, even in kind of a static format.
Yes.
So there's the effective prompting as part of this workshop. Another piece of this, which I'm still working on, and this will be kind of a hands-on moment as part of this workshop immediately. I don't know if you've ever played this game called Mad Libs.
No. Do I need to play it?
You do. It's
Okay.
hilarious. They produce a story and they leave blanks in the story, like a noun or an adjective or whatever it happens to be. And then you go to whoever you're playing this with and you ask them, hey, give me an adjective, just that random stuff. Give me a noun, give me a first name, and then when you read it back, it's hilarious. So I'm working on something for Copilot for security for these promptings called Mad Prompts. So Mad Libs, Mad Prompts. It will be completed shortly. You literally go out to a website. It asks you a question to be able to fill in these prompts. You click and drag the prompt to the proper blank,
How
and
cute.
then it will tell you if you're correct or not, right? So analyze a recent phishing email trend and suggest mitigation strategies. That's a good prompt. But I could fill that in with if I think it's Godzilla or Godzilla needs a cookie.
Analyze a recent monster email sounds correct
Yeah.
too.
So you can have a little bit of fun with it. And it is a hands-on component of this workshop.
Nice.
And then finally, we end on prompt books within Copilot for security, because as you start to develop really good prompts that you trust and you feel comfortable that they're producing the proper results, you can create what's called prompt books in Copilot for security. So you take all of these really good prompts and put them together so that the result is absolutely stellar. So you become a good prompter, and now you're creating prompt books. And from a security perspective, I can click one thing and it's going to produce the results and allow me to understand what my daily work might look like.
So are you discussing also, of course, the creation of a workbook and then the modification of a workbook, the sharing and all of these things,
Yes.
right?
So we will go through the entire prompt book from creation to saving it. Also going through, I don't know if you've talked about this in any of your previous sessions, but Copilot for Security also saves any sessions that are generated as part of asking Copilot for Security questions. And you can go back. It's an endless list, and it's last forever within that environment. They don't get deleted unless you go in and delete them. So you may have some really screwy things in there as you're starting to try to test this stuff, right? Some of them are pretty hilarious. I've actually gone back and looked at mine. I'm like, man, the early days when I was trying this out, I was horrible. I was a bad prompter. I was a search engine person. Now I'm a prompter.
So can we go a little bit maybe into a demo and
Yeah.
show how would a result look like with this prompt and then adjusting it to a better prompt or something? What are the demos you brought with you?
Yeah, so I did want to show some things that we're actually working on at Microsoft from a prompting perspective. It is super important to learn how to prompt because these copilots are going to be around for a long time. So getting a good understanding is important. So I was at a conference 3 weeks ago now, the Midwest Management Summit at the Mall of America in Minnesota. It's actually at a mall. It was awesome. I was there to talk about Copilot for security. So this conference is more generally for endpoint management, but even these endpoint managers these days are kind of focused on the security piece. Intune at Microsoft, if people aren't aware, falls under our security umbrella. That's a whole different discussion. But Copilot for Security also integrates or embeds with Intune. And I thought this was super fantastic. And this is kind of where we're leading and helping customers with this prompting, helping build their skill set, but also helping them get to what they need to with Copilot for Security. This is the Intune console. And you see up top already, we have Copilot for Security embedded into Intune and some really quick things that we can do as part of Copilot for Security. So you can kind of look at what these prompts look like. So instead of generating your own, we kind of lead you down this path of the specific actions that you might accomplish or always want to accomplish as part of your Intune administration. There's a troubleshooting. So if I click on troubleshooting within Intune, here I have a device that is non-compliant. So I'm going to go into that device and I can choose Explore with Copilot, which is Copilot for Security is going to pull up and give me some prompts that we know at Microsoft that our customers use all the time, but also we know that these prompts are going to produce proper responses to give customers the ability to kind of get an idea of what's going on here. So one of the things I can do, I could analyze, I could summarize this device, show apps, show group memberships. These are things that our customers always do as part of Intune and managing their endpoints. So I can just click this really quick. And while that's running, it's going to take this device and it's going to summarize and give me like all the stuff that you see there, the primary user, who it's enrolled by, all of that goodness. Understanding that Copilot for Security is one service, but has multiple experiences. So these embedded experiences reside in things like Intune, Intra, in our Defender XDR portal, the unified portal. These embedded are produced and reside there. So here's a really good summary of this. Obviously, I didn't delve into why this is non-compliant, but you can see here that we're focusing on helping our customers deliver better prompts without actually having to learn prompting. However, I still recommend that they do.
So, of course, those were predefined prompts in the Intune
Yes.
console. For now, I think if someone wants to be more specific, let's say create a report in an Excel format that I can send to my manager, they would need to go to the standalone experience and then do that here, right?
Yes, absolutely. So here is the standalone. And in fact, you'll see this refresh. I mentioned this is one service, but different experiences. This will update here shortly, and it will show me what actually I did over in Intune. So it's all tied together, right? So even if I went into my sessions, it's going to tell me about the things that I just did in Intune just a second ago, right? So it's all there. It's all compiled. But if I wanted to go a little bit deeper, if I wanted to ask a very specific question about Intune, I would go in and use Intune, and then I could ask about that workstation, whatever that workstation's name was, and I could do the same thing here, and I could actually, get
Mhm.
very specific about those responses or combine those responses with other things or other skill sets that I have within Copilot for Security.
This is awesome. Like the assistant provided, da, 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 now you can go there and then maybe basically say, and now, I don't know, compare this device with another device. And it would exactly do,
I can do
wow.
all that
Yeah,
here.
I love it.
Eventually, one day, based on that discussion at that conference, they said that, Intune will have the ability to be able to type that stuff in, but they feel it's just better to be able to kind of direct customers at this point. So
Thanks, Rod, for showing us your workshop and the agenda and the content and also a little demo. So how can people now, start getting their hands dirty? Are you planning on delivering it? There's also Microsoft Learn Live. Maybe you can partner with them. Or, yeah, what's your suggestion here?
Well, yeah, look for things like that. I do always intend to ensure that, like I said earlier, that this is available to everyone. So I would love to be able to deliver this live, maybe some remote recorded capabilities. So, yeah, probably Microsoft Learn Live. There's also the Microsoft Security Insights show that happens live every Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, and then it's available across all the podcast networks. We do talk about prompting and security and AI as part of that. So I do make announcements when this has been updated or when it will be updated and things like that. So that's another way. The other way to get your hands on this, because it is updated constantly, and I will be updating it today, actually, there will be a new version of this, is on my GitHub repository. So if you go to github.com/rod-trent, you can find my Copilot for Security GitHub repository. You won't have to look hard because this is one of the most popular. And if you're familiar with how GitHub works, it bubbles up the most popular repositories for an individual. This is at the top right now, even though I have like hundreds of GitHub repositories. So you'll be able to find it pretty easy. Go into the prompting section, go into the workshop section, you'll be able to find this.
Yeah. And of course, because it also contains hands-on. So people are like, how do I get a trial? And we all know it's not yet available, but I think we're working on something that people might get access to. So stay tuned.
We are. And obviously, because we do work at Microsoft, we can't promise a date or a time or any of that, but it is coming.
So, Rod, I think we added all kind of links throughout the episode where people can find the content, can find you, other shows, and the slides and so on. Thank you so much for being my expert on today's show. It was amazing to finally have you on it. It's been a long time. And I hope I will have you back again for some other topics, or maybe I will join your Inside Show one day.
Yeah, absolutely.
And thanks everyone for watching, and see you soon. Bye-bye.